Welcome to the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, hosted by your favourite duo, Stephen and Charlene. They're here to help you transform your mindset and create a positive outlook on life. Are you tired of feeling stuck and unfulfilled? Are you ready to take control of your thoughts and emotions and rewrite your story? Well, you're in the right place. They will be sharing inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you on your journey to a better you. You'll learn how to let go of negative self-talk, embrace your strengths, and focus on the good things in life. Each episode will be joined by amazing guests who have rewritten their own life stories and are now living their best lives. From successful entrepreneurs to accomplished athletes, we'll bring you stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. So grab a cup of coffee, get cozy, and get ready to be inspired. Tune in every week for a new episode of the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Let's rewrite our stories together and make every day count.
In this episode, we have the privilege of delving into the inspiring journey of Belinda Smith, a remarkable individual who courageously walked away from a 21-year career as a senior constable of the New South Wales Police Force to pursue a path as the CEO of Renovate and Real Estate, a renovation education business. Get ready to be inspired and empowered as we dive into the incredible journey of Belinda Smith.
Before we get started, we want to remind you that the information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are their own and do not represent the views of any organisation or entity. Additionally, any information presented should not be taken as legal, medical, or financial advice. Always consult with a licensed professional in the respective field for any advice or guidance. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic and learn how to transform our lives through positive thinking and taking control of our stories. Thanks for joining us.
Before we begin, we want to give you a heads up. We may be discussing some sensitive and personal topics that might bring up some strong emotions or discomfort. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space, but we know that everyone's experiences and triggers are different. If you start feeling overwhelmed or triggered during an episode, remember to prioritize your well-being. It's totally okay to hit pause and take a breath. Your self-care is important, and looking after your mental and emotional health should always come first. If you ever need extra support, we encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional or someone you trust. You're not alone, and there are resources available to help you on your personal journey. Thank you for joining us on this incredible ride with the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Together we'll navigate life's challenges and rewrite our narratives with strength and resilience.
Well, I'm really excited. We've got Belinda Smith on our podcast today. And
yes.
Belinda, you've got an amazing story, like from a police officer to a renovation guru and one of the leading renovation experts in Australia as well. And you've been featured on some television programs also.
SBS News.
Yeah.
I have.
Well, let's go back to right at the beginning. Who is Belinda before she was a renovation expert?
Belinda was Belinda Shaw when I was a youngster who grew up in Caringbah South with beautiful parents in an ordinary middle-class environment who loved to go to the beach, play tennis, played a lot of sport growing up. I think I was just your typical Sutherland Shire girl. And that's it in a nutshell. And then after school, I decided to join the police force and I spent 21 years in the police force. I think as a kid, I always thought that I'd do something where I was working with people and I could contribute. I don't know, I was just a bit of a nerd at school, prefect and all that kind of stuff. So it was no surprise to everyone who knew me that I joined the police force. And I think when I left there, I ended up doing something completely different. You know, my life has just evolved along the way with no real plan as a child to do anything like I'm doing now.
Well, you were in the police force for 21 years. That's quite a big chunk of your life. What was that like for you being we're talking the 80s, you said.
Yeah.
So what was that like being a woman in a predominantly man environment back in the 80s?
I'm really thankful that I have a good sense of humour and that I can turn almost anything into a bit of a giggle because it was challenging at times. I remember back in those days, there were 11 police women in my group. There were 137 men. So we were fiercely outnumbered. But I also think that the girls back then, we banded together a little bit. We had a point to prove. I mean, it was only 2 classes before I was out in general duties. Only 2 classes before, women were wearing skirts. They had batons in a handbag. They didn't have the same kind of appointments as the guys. We weren't expected to do any general duties or normal policing. We were really just the school lecturers. So we had a point to prove, us, young ones out there on the streets for the first time in amongst some guys. A lot of the guys were great, really, really great. A lot of the older men kind of took me under their wing because I was a little bit sheltered. I had had this nice life in the Sutherland Shire as a child, and I was pretty sheltered. And I remember joining the police force, my eyes were wide open, like wide open. My first section was as a junior trainee in the fraud squad, and then also the drug squad straight out of school. And I remember walking through the streets of King's Cross with these detectives and going into all of these places where there were strip shows going on and drug deals happening. And I had no idea that any of that really existed until I was in the middle of it. Yeah. So, I mean, I loved it. I loved the challenge of it all. It was certainly a male-dominated field, and I had to hold my own.
You worked your way up and became an undercover detective, is that correct?
Yeah. No, I was in the undercover detectives for a while at the King's Cross drug squad in 86 and 87. And I also did some special operations in the St. George area too, undercover surveillance. So it was great fun. I always say to people, they say, what was your time like in the police force? And I always say, I'd hate one of my kids to want to join the police because I know that I saw some things, lots of things that I can't unsee. And it's really unusual to speak to police who did 21 years like I have, who haven't had some things that they were exposed to that are definitely the nastier side of life and the nastier side of people, the violent side of people that I'd never seen growing up. So, yeah, my eyes are wide open. In saying that, it was also, I've always felt privileged to help people out. Like I came home many days and thought, that was a really nice day. Something happened where I was able to really change someone's state or help them out of a bind, or, it might even be, a successful court endeavour where, the offender was found guilty and the victims were happy. And just, every day was different, and it was challenging and it was great. And I think I was actually pretty decent at it. While you're in it, you don't think about it. But I've had some police say to me later on, we had a reunion this year, and they said, "You're a great cop." And at the time I was just working every day like we all do in whatever we do for our bosses.
I've always wondered, how do you separate when you're at home? Because you did say you see a lot of things you can't unsee.
Yeah.
I know that post-traumatic stress is quite high.
Yeah.
Within the police force. How did you manage that? Were you able to separate when you went home? And were you able to keep both worlds separate?
I tried desperately to. Before I was married, I used to go home. Sometimes I'd sit on the end of mum and dad's bed after a long day, and they would wake them up at about midnight and say, "I just need to talk." Then my husband copped a little bit of it, but I tried not to talk to people who were outside of the police force too much, because I knew mum and dad were so worried about what I faced every day, as was my husband. So I found the more that I spoke to them, the more worried I knew they were every day I went to work. Every day I put that uniform back on, or I packed up my gun and things and went off to the station. They were nervous because I was probably, sometimes I overshared what I did at work or the things that I'd seen or experienced. So I learned over time not to do that. That's why a lot of police and people in emergency services, you'll see them meet friends or their peers, and they'll go out, they'll have a few drinks at night time, they'll be able to laugh at things that really aren't funny, but they'll find some kind of humour in some situation that's a bit dire, lean on each other quite a bit, lean on the community around themselves. When I had kids, I had to really focus in the car on the way home, not to take it all home with me. Obviously, I didn't want to talk to the kids about things that I'd seen or been through at work. So That's definitely a strategy and a skill. And I was pretty worn out. At the end of my 21 years, I was pretty, I had some moments and I was really worn out, worn out.
Did you have, Belinda, an opportunity, like when you're working there, to have a mentor or someone that you could debrief to, like a senior person in your area of
I think that they're better at that now than they were back then. They're much, much more aware now. Like I look at the news, and if something big has happened, like a big accident, you'll hear them say, we are supporting the crew and we are, looking after them, and we've got services available to support them. Back in our day, it was very much, you just go to the club afterwards and have some drinks. That was it. That was the debrief.
Yeah.
There was the police chaplains that used to roam around. If they would come in and see if you'd faced something pretty horrific. I remember I went to an armed hold up and was very, very close to shooting someone because they faced me with a pistol, which turned out to be a replica. It all went down really, really fast. But I remember shaking. The offender was put in the back of the police vehicle, and I remember just being outside that car and just shaking about the fact that I almost shot someone within a second. I don't even know how it didn't happen. And I was visited by the police chaplain that night, basically said, I'd heard that you've been through a bit of an event today, and I just want to let you know that I'm available. So, there's some stuff that you just do. When you're in the middle of it, everything kind of goes a bit slow motion. It's afterwards. It's the effects afterwards. And I think that some of those things build on you year after year. I found I became a little bit hard. Like I could feel myself becoming hard. And I had to really try and be a soft mum and yet go to work and be resilient about what I was about to see and do during the day. Yeah. I did my best,
Yeah, and I can see how that can be quite conflicting for some people.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst that made you decide I need a new life?
There were a couple of things going down. One is I landed right in the middle of a little bit of corruption, and where I became a whistleblower at work. And so I was watching surveillance going down on other members of the police force. That was so stressful. At the same time, I'd just been to a siege, and I turned up with the detectives to do a bust early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were met by an offender who burst through the door with a shotgun, and we all just scattered. We were busting through the door at the same time he came out of the door at us, and we all just scattered. We hid in bushes, we hid under trees, we hid under the deck. And I remember being there until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon from really early in the morning. By the time I actually got home, it was probably closer to 4:30. I got back to the station about 3. It was about 4:30 by the time I got home. I didn't turn up to pick my kids up from school. They were sitting on the school gate waiting with the principal, and one of my friends locally took the kids home. Mum and my husband had heard all through the radio that there was a big siege that had gone down, and they knew it was my local patrol, and they knew they couldn't contact me, so they knew I was involved somewhere. And I remember getting home, my husband, he's just said, that is enough. And I actually said to myself, okay, I feel like this is just not about me anymore and my desire to help people. My life is constantly on the line, like all police. And I just thought the two things all at once. I've just, I'd done more than 21 years and I'd had an opportunity to retire, and I just went, now's the time. It was just like, now's the time. I'm done,
So was it like obviously these things happened, which helped you make the decision, but was there also like a deep, intuitive, enough is enough?
Yeah. Honestly, I thought, when it was just about, when you're 20 or 21 and you just feel invincible, I remember going and being in fights and just thinking, oh, I'm so close to getting knocked out, but that was really good. And I'm really glad you were there. There was all this banter at work about something that had gone down that was a bit frantic, a big fist fight or, a violent domestic. And I always felt like I'd survive. But as the older I got, the more I started to think, well, what happens if I don't? My kids then were probably 11, 10. I had 3 kids in 3 years, so 11, 10 and 9, or 11, 10 and 8.5. And I thought, what happens if something happens to me? There was just more in my world at that point. And it was time. I was really done.
What made you choose your new path? Because your new path is quite different.
Yeah,
It's all like, yeah, how did you come
Exactly.
across renovation? Tell us that story.
Husband and I, he's a mechanic by trade, and I'd worked in the police, and we really just were trying to live our best lives locally. And we did that by first buying a home unit and doing that up and selling it, and then buying a block of land and then building a house with a builder. And he was on shift work and I was on shift work. So renovation was always something we'd done on the side. We were forever grabbing old pieces of furniture and doing them up and just doing the best we could with the money that we had to build a life. And when I left the police force, I was very, very lost. I thought I really did face the thoughts. I was facing the thoughts of, I'm actually quite useless, I think, out there in the real world. What else am I going to do? I felt very institutionalized. I felt like all I ever knew was inside that role. I'd gone straight from high school, straight there. And I really thought I was quite clueless to what else I could do. And so I did a real estate course just to get qualified and out of interest. And I did a bookkeeping course just to keep myself. I really did work very, very hard on building myself up again and building some kind of, I don't know, I call it character. It's not even character. It was just, I was reaching out to do things that occupied my mind, that filled my heart and my soul and my time, that made me feel productive, even though I was trying just to heal and to start anew. And I wasn't sure what it was going to look like, but I knew the things I liked to do. And what I liked to do was, I had a passion for property and I had a passion for painting, loved to paint, and things like that made me feel good. So I think it was kind of healing. I'd just do up a room or something to make myself feel better every day. And one thing really did lead to the next, like putting building blocks in place.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was even consciously doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the healing process. So keeping busy was obviously part of it, and filling your time. Was there any spirituality? Was there any coaching or mentoring? I know that you're an avid meditator.
Yeah.
And that's very important, mindfulness to you. Do you want to talk how that helped?
Oh, always. Even back in the day when I was interested in property, I would always go to an event and I'd have some kind of mentor, or someone that I'd follow their information and their path. So I always knew the importance of having that. And you are right, back in the day, there was no one really in the police force that I really had in that role. But outside and from starting from a very low point, I really reached out online a lot, more and more was available on the internet. So personal development courses, Tony Robbins. I just found that when I was feeling sad, lost and lonely, even though I had a beautiful family, I just do things on purpose that lit me up, that brought my level from up a notch. And that would be, I'd start to focus on, or I'd always eat clean, and I'd start to do some more exercise because that made me feel better. I'd go to the beach and have a swim because being in the salt water made me feel better as well. At the same time, I was doing a few courses. And I really did have one mentor after the other. One guy first was a guy called Todd, and he was just basically a property mentor, but he was also very aware of personal development being part of our ability to go and, be better property investors. And so that was kind of, and it's so funny that I'm in that role myself now, which is bizarre because I never set out really to do that. But I worked with him for a little while, and then I took on a coach who's really just a personal and business coach. He's worked with a lot of people before who have addiction issues, and he works with a range of people. And because he'd been in some kind of digital marketing space, he helped me get my business going online as well. So I wouldn't be without a mentor or a coach right now. It's just going to be part of what I do for the rest of my life. I worked really, really hard on myself. Does that sound weird? Is that a weird thing to say?
No, absolutely not. And I think what I'm hearing before was your identity was so wrapped up in what you were doing as a police person that once you left the police force, that identity was lost.
I felt like I was standing on the end of a cliff.
Right.
I was like, I just thought, how, how, where? I really didn't have any idea of where to start. I just thought, I'm just going to go and learn something. I'm going to live clean. Well, live clean. Not that I had any addiction problems, but I thought I'm just going to live a really healthy life. I'm going to focus on that because I know that makes me feel good physically. At the same time, I'm going to do something to occupy my mind. That's all I knew. And I just at the same time, I was forever painting and playing with a room, switching the lounge room around.
Playing with the room and switching the lounge room around.
Yeah.
Could you become a coach in renovation and real estate?
Yeah. When or how? I started a Facebook group. I started to get involved in being online, and personal development, and so I started a Facebook group about renovating with a friend who'd flipped a few homes. We started it together. That Facebook group grew to 12,000 people in a heartbeat. And I thought, oh, we're just chatting about paints and, all the stuff that we enjoyed. Next minute it grew. And then I thought, and because of the coaches that I'd taken on, I thought there is actually business in this. So it evolved into a business from just our desire to help people for their questions about DIY, essentially.
What are some of the services you're providing to your clients?
Well, it started back then with people saying, could you come and help me renovate my house? I'm stuck. So instead of saying no, this is where it all started. I said, oh, okay. And then I thought, I don't really know how that looks, but I'll just go help somebody else do their place. And the business, the systems evolved around that. And then from there, people said, can you run a workshop? And then we started to run workshops. And then I thought I can take this online, and I worked out how to put a course online. And now I've got 700 students. Who knew?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What was that like for your family? Here we are, mum stressed as a police officer, right? And now she's, got this totally different career. Like, I'm sure they were so proud, but also like, what's happening here?
Bit of a head spin.
The thing I noticed the most is the more that I did to kind of reinvent myself, the braver they became in their own endeavors. So I just remember my daughter leaving her job to go and do something on her own when my business really started to take off. And my son did the same. So the braver I became, I feel like I led this path like some crazy warrior woman. And my kids, they became braver too. I don't know. I don't even know if that's a weird thing to say, because I'm just mum, but I just knew, and I felt more significant. The more successful this business became, the more I felt like I'd landed on my feet again. Yeah. And so, and even though I was embarrassed when I first started, I thought none of my friends are going to think that I know anything about renovation, because all through the years, all they saw was me going to work. They didn't know that on the side, I was forever fiddle-diddling with a house or a unit and, building equity and investing in New Zealand and all those little things we were doing very quietly behind the scenes. So it was probably a little bit of a surprise for people to see me in this new role as much as it really surprised myself.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because obviously we've spoken to a lot of people and interviewed a lot of people, and your story is really different because it's almost like, not that you fell into it, but yet you fell into it, but yet by falling into it, you've discovered your purpose.
Oh, yeah. And to be able to, I still feel like I've got the ability to help people the same as I was before, but in a completely different capacity. And in the end, that's what fills my cup. There are some weeks I work 60 hours and probably most weeks. And certainly in the beginning, there was no money in it at all in the beginning, but I felt that happiness, and I felt you know, when you're really good at something, and I was good at the cops, like I felt that again. It had been a long time since I'd between feeling that, you know, like I was in my flow again. Like I had something that I woke up in the morning and got excited about.
Wonderful. It sounds like
Really cool.
That same heart space of wanting to really just help people and serve, really, and be of service to people.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I just it's weird too. Other people say, "Oh, you know, I've watched your business grow," and they're excited for me, and it's been fun. It's been really good fun. And now nothing makes me happier than when one of my students joins, absolutely terrified about buying a house or doing a renovation, and the next minute they've done 1, 2, 3, or 4. Then they quit their jobs and go and do it full time. Like that makes me happy too, because I think I've had the chance to change somebody else's life as well. And, you know, right back at the beginning when I was just going to do a real estate course, I couldn't see the future. I didn't know what the future was. And now I look at all the little things that I was doing and think, yeah, it makes sense, but all along the way it really didn't. But I'm a big believer, and we spoke about this before, about meditating and letting things flow and just doing what feels right at the time, and, you know, being still sometimes and going, okay, what next? And things always land in my lap.
Yeah,
really.
there's definitely a lot of healing in the stillness.
Yeah. Belinda, if I can ask it from, you've had quite a few experiences now, like as you've relayed your story to us, where you've actually stood at the precipice, where you've felt that fear of like the unknown of what to do. What would you actually say to someone who fears the unknown and is just afraid to take the risks in their life?
I think that the fear of not doing something for me was greater. That was hurting.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the fear of doing something was big, but the fear of not doing something for the rest of my days, that really worried me. So I knew I'd do something, and I didn't care what it was at that moment, but I needed to find my little patch.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's really interesting, because, you know, some people fear doing, and your fear was not doing.
Yeah,
It's quite different to the majority. And I think it's, you know, are we motivated by pain or are we motivated by gain? You know, there's two different factors that motivate people. So that's really important. As part of your business growth, you also started your own podcast.
I did.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your podcast and how you came up with that.
I came up with it because I was, you know those people that just have online courses and they sell the courses and they actually don't care about the people, they just sell the courses. Yeah. I'm wired differently than that. So I would get involved in people's stories and where they were starting and what it meant for them to do their first property investment, or to pay down their house, or to be able to renovate with their kids and get them started in the property market. And so I started this podcast called More Than Renovating, because I worked out what I was doing was much, much more than renovating. And I've really enjoyed talking to people and getting to know their stories. I just like the human endeavor, same as you guys. Like, you meet some really interesting people that have done a lot, or even the little wins, you know, people that'll share their little wins along the way. And so, so it's been really cool starting that. I call myself an influencer. The kids laugh at me all the time. I'm a social media influencer. They go, no, you're just a mum. And now a grandma. How fun is that?
So, with your students and with starting the course, I can see that you have quite different niches. So it could be someone that's just wanting to renovate their house, wanting to learn some tips or tricks. I was watching a video earlier on of one of your social media posts where you're talking about color, then you're talking about the importance of the kitchen, and that a coat of color or a coat of paint can really bring the value of the house up, and the kitchen can bring the house up. Yeah. But then you're also training students that want to go into flipping properties. Yeah. How did you develop those niches so specific to cater from two extremes?
I think what happened was I developed those niches from how my own business evolved and my own experience. So one was the flipping homes, because that's what most people are interested in doing. And the TV shows from the US on Fox and all of that have really fueled that industry. And people love to earn little bits of money as a side hustle, or, you know, quit their jobs eventually and do it. Those possibilities are there if they're the right people and they're really keen to get started. But other people would contact me and say, I'm not interested at all. I don't want to pick up a paintbrush. Can you renovate for me? And there's only one of me. And I did some consultancies until I became too busy. So I trained the experienced renovators inside my group now to go and do those consultancies and help other people. So I think business evolves from just getting into it and doing it yourself. And if a need kind of, you know, raises its hand and you can fulfill that market, then, you know, that's all I do. Is I just think, oh, there's a real need in the community, so why not say yes? And I say yes instead of no a lot.
That's a great philosophy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just saying yes instead of no. What were your biggest misconceptions of you rewriting your story? What was the biggest, misconceptions when you came to rewriting your own life story?
I worried that I'd feel complete again, or I'd feel happy. And settled, and I am, and it's taken a long time. My misconception was that I was only good at doing what I knew, and that I didn't have the skills that were transferable to start something completely new that I'd never experienced before, that I wouldn't be able to do it. Misconceptions were that I was too old to get online and do all of this, you know, internet marketing stuff that I've ended up having to learn bit by bit and conquer bit by bit. So that I just wasn't enough, that I wouldn't be able to do it. Those things popped up in my head a lot. I've worked really, really hard to overcome those issues as they arise. And all I do is I try and stay calm. I try and meditate. I break things down into little chunks. I attack things in little chunks, and I pat myself on the back here in the quiet all by myself if I've done something or mastered something that I thought I couldn't have before. That's it, just bit by bit.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to a lot of the themes we're seeing, and when you pat yourself in the back, like one of our podcasts, it's all about self-love.
Yeah.
And self-love is one of the keys in rewriting your own story. What has self-love played in your rewriting your story?
I think it's helped with me being brave enough to put my face to camera, me being brave enough to share my story like I am tonight. Thank you guys for the privilege. It's been really cool. Me being brave enough to stand in front of a room of people when I'd really not done any public speaking before. In the police force, the only public speaking I'd ever done was when I was the exhibit officer for a short time and I talked about evidence in court. Next minute, I find myself running workshops. And one of those workshops had 390 people in a room. Wow. And I'm terrified a lot. And I just always just say, just face the fear, you'll be fine. Face the fear, you'll be fine. And I sit in the discomfort of it. I allow myself to feel the discomfort of it and then just go do it. And I am never worried about being perfect. I'm so not perfect. Some of the content I put out is not perfect either. And I just think doing the doing is far more important than worrying about getting every little thing right. And that if I fuss around with getting every little thing right, I can't serve the community properly that I've created.
Wow, that's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, and you know what I get out of that, because that's actually really hit a nerve with me. So thank you, Belinda.
Oh, I didn't mean to.
No, it's really good because in a good way. I think what I'm getting out of that is you're putting others first.
Yeah.
Oh, honestly, even when I think about, people talk about their why. For me, it's always my who. Yeah. And my who, back in the day when I started this with my business partner, I'd focus, because I was always used to putting myself second a little bit. I still focus on who am I doing this for. I found it easier to move through the workload and to move through conquering those things that I hadn't done before if I'd focus on who's this for. This is not just for me. It's for my husband, Brett. This will be great for him. We'll be able to retire. He'll be able to retire, or it's for my business partner, or it's for somebody else, or it's for the kids. If I wasn't feeling it myself, I'd change my focus a little bit and say, okay, I'm willing to do this, but who's this important for? Not just me. That made it easier to stay focused and to work hard.
And I think that's such a great lesson for anyone that doesn't really know what their why is.
Yeah. If you can't find a why, find a who.
Yeah.
Find a who. I think the who, in my case, the who's always been more powerful than the why.
Yeah, that is yeah, I love that too. That's really powerful.
And it just reminds me now, Belinda, you mentioned at some stage tonight that you really wanted to be that soft mother for your children. And that police force was not allowing you to do that, like where they were, but this sounds like you found your place now where you're able to do that no matter where you are.
Yeah. And, they always say that, would you do it for free? I'd actually do what I do right now for nothing. I wake up every day, have a shower, get dressed, and I'm in my own house a lot, and I do a lot of stuff on Zoom every day, but I get up and I just turn the computer on and I I meet with my team. Now I've got quite a significant team. I've got about 12 people in some way, shape or form in my team. I've created quite the beast, and I'm really quietly proud of myself for doing it, because I'm like, who knew I was capable of this? Wow. So it's kind of, I don't want to sound like, I don't know. I'm proud of myself.
I think you should be, and please, we hear your humility through your story. Absolutely. And I think when you said those years as a police officer, there has been so many transferable skills in you rewriting your story now. And I think resilience to not be perfect is definitely something that I'm hearing throughout this, because it does take resilience to know, let's just do what we have to do. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. And, that's one of the main messages that I pass on to my students who are doing a renovation is just, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know it all. If you can, organise your life, organise your kids, go to work for a boss, then you can organise a few tradies on site. You can paint. If it's not perfect, it's not perfect. It's just, I think, just the way I live makes it really easy for me to pass that same kind of message on to other people in a natural way.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask some current questions around the property market.
Good.
And, people are struggling to get into the property market, and people want to have that as part of their story. Interest rates are very high at the moment. A lot of families are struggling. I was watching a report today that said property is going to go up very soon as well.
Yep, it is.
What is your advice to people starting out that don't have a home, or people wanting to buy an investment home? What advice would you give them in this market?
My strong advice is just get started. Just get started. Okay, so we have this big expectation to live in a really nice home, I think, in an area that's perfect for us. That's what everybody wants. But the truth is that so many, especially the youngsters, they can't get the deposits together to do that straight away. So they have to start somewhere. So if they did something with their parents to build up their nest egg, or they went without traveling for 2 years and said, we're just not going to do that for the next couple of years. We are just going to commit to saving until we get that deposit together. Then you don't have to live that frugally forever, but at some point, got to make a start somewhere, starting from what you have. Take advantage of the offerings if there are special little offerings like first home buyers offerings, stamp duty concessions and things like that. Please look out for those and take advantage of those. And, perhaps you might have to rent where you want to live and buy an investment property somewhere else, but just have something. Because what terrifies me is as this gap broadens, and you're so right with talking about that gap, as the gap broadens, there will be a lot of people now who rent all of their lives and will struggle to keep up with the rises in those rents all of their lives. but at the time of retirement will be really left high and dry because, on a pension, if their income is not sufficient, then, that's going to be a time where they face, I would say, hardship. And so it's really important to get that start, just to make it happen. Lean on family and friends, do something together. Where there's a will, there's a way. There really is.
Wow. And I can really hear the shift in your voice. You are very passionate about that.
Yeah, you bet I am. And I have youngsters, and I remember going upstairs one day, and my daughter and her friends were all sitting around the table, and there were probably two of them who said, I really want to buy a property. And the others all said, oh, we've already given up on that. We're just going to rent because we'll never be able to afford it. And honestly, I'm like, stop, guys. Of course you can, find a way. There is a way. You find a way. Sell your car. Do whatever you need to do to get started. Commit not to go on holidays. They're all talking about going to Europe. And I'm like, that's awesome. But you can't have it all at the same time. Just layer out your plan to allow for some property ownership in there somewhere, and just do whatever you need to do to make it happen. It might mean 2 jobs. It might mean not drinking cocktails and drinking water while you're out. I mean, there are a million ways, and it's not easy. It's just not easy, but it's very, very achievable, and it still is. It really is. If you commit to it, it's very, very achievable. And I think we let our youngsters off the hook too easily by saying, just, enjoy your life. It's not that important, because we're forgetting what it's going to be like for them in 40 years' time.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That is a really good point. Maybe we are sending the wrong message to the young people. Maybe we are forming the narrative of their own stories by saying it's going to get expensive, and most people can't afford their properties. So we're programming their narratives. Oh,
they program each other's narrative.
Yeah, that's quite sad, actually.
Yeah, and it still is very, very possible. I mean, you look at Sydney and the capital cities, not just Sydney, Brisbane, all the expensive capital cities, but the further out you travel, the cheaper properties are, and maybe that's where people have just got to go for a few years. It's no different than when I was in the police and we would take a 2-year secondment at Burke or in the sticks somewhere. If you wanted to end up in a coastal town, you'd take that as like, okay, I'm going to do my couple of years out west, and then I'm going to choose the location of my choice. I don't see it as any different than that. It's like, okay, for a while, it's not going to be perfect for me, but I'm prepared to put up with ABC. So, later down the track, I'll be on my feet.
I'm going to really put you on the spot with this question. And, we don't give any financial advice on this show, or we don't, prescribe to anything, and people should seek their own advice with their own financial consultant.
Disclaimer, yes. Yep, got it.
Matt, what is your opinion around using your superannuation to purchase homes? Because I know that's quite trendy.
Okay, so personally, no disclaimer, please don't sue me. Personally, I think if you're going to use your super for anything, it's got to be real good. Like, you've got to have a really good reason to do that. And I think you can make really good property choices and do very, very well with superannuation invested in property. But if you're going to use your super, again, to buy, how the kids were taking out their super during COVID. Yeah, to go and, buy new shoes and a car and just depreciating items that don't serve them in the long term, bad idea. But to use your super to pop into some property investing, like actually 2 of my kids use their super. One's bought a house at Narellan Vale that's already gone up in value a lot, and the other one's bought a unit in Guy Mears, same thing. So I'm like, I don't see that as an issue, because then your property does become your guarantee later on.
Yeah, for retirement. Awesome.
Yeah. So long as people just got to be sensible with their money.
It comes down to priorities, doesn't it?
Yeah, priorities.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of strategic property investing that I speak about, as well as just renovating. Renovating is a leading strategy to earn, to grow a portfolio faster in little chunks, because you're forcing value, buying something old, you're forcing value upon it and raising the value of that property faster, and then you can draw out the equity or sell it again and go and do another one, or pay down some debt, whatever you want to do. So it'll get you there faster. But there are other strategies, like subdivisions, looking for potential in properties, rooming houses, Airbnbs. I mean, there are multitudes of property strategies to create wealth.
Yeah.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit of, do you have one particular workshop or many different forms of workshop if someone's interested in one particular area or the other?
Yeah. Okay. So my lead workshop is renovating, and renovating is full of lots of moving parts, right from buying properties under value and off market. So you're not, with every bunny at auction paying too much in the first place. It's really important to get the deals done and make your money really at the front end, and then how to do all the right changes to a property, how to sell it for more, all of those strategies. So renovation is a 3-day workshop. I have 3-day workshops. I also have the courses that run online. If people want to work with me, pay once and then you're in it for lifetime. And the reason I have it like that is because I know that some people are going to be busy doing some work on properties 1 year, and then they might take a year off, or they might take a few months off. So it's just simple to run it that way. And then I'm always around and they're always around, and it's great fun, good fun. I love my workshops. I mean, I like teaching online, but I don't know about you guys, but there's nothing better than sitting in a room full of people and having a coffee with people at morning tea and
it's
finding out what's in their heads. It's not all about the property.
Like you said,
there's definitely a lot
when you're in a live workshop. Like, the energy is fantastic.
I love them. Yeah.
What impact do you want your story to have for others?
Oh, that's a big question. And a question that probably makes me uncomfortable in a weird way, because I'm just doing my thing, I would like people to become more aware of their potential and just to have a go. I have this little saying, it's so Aussie. I think, I can't say that out in public, but I do. And it's just have a crack.
Yeah.
I just want people to have a go, because I know how much fun the ride is.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know what? If your story has that, and I think it will, because you had a go and you have developed this empire out of creating a Facebook group.
That's it.
Organically.
Yeah, that's it.
And we always, when we're talking, when we host our meditation workshops, and especially in our meditation instructors workshop, we always talk about force negates. And when you try to force something to happen, the natural law is to repel what has happened. And you spoke about flow, and you spoke about how meditation caused you to go in the flow. And I can really see that in your story, that the flow was very important.
Yeah, it feels congruent. It feels, safe, easy. It's not without work, but it's easy.
Yeah. It's definitely not without work, but look at what you've created.
So as we get towards the end, Belinda, we've got 2 last questions to ask you.
Yeah.
And one of those is, what advice would you give to those who are looking to rewrite their life story?
Oh, just start with whatever they can put their hands on, or whatever makes them feel better. It is like climbing a mountain, just one step at a time. And there's nothing worse than feeling like you're at that bottom of the mountain and you don't even know where the mountain leads. But just, look after. I think it's really important for us all to look after ourselves physically as well, just to eat well and to get out there and exercise, do the little things that make us happy. At the same time, just take whatever skills we have and think about how we can help others, how we can commit to doing something useful and rewarding.
That's right. And if you were to go back now and rewrite your life story, what would that look like?
Probably the same. I think that I'm the person I am because of what I've been through, and I know a lot of people say that, but I think learning to cope with the things that I did and saw in the police force and face my fears has made me quite fearless now. There's nothing I do now is anything like what I faced on a daily at work. And so I think that's really prepared me for the future that I still have in front of me, even though I'm getting a little bit older. And I just think it's important to be active for me. And Yeah, just have all of that. I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't change a thing.
Awesome. Belinda, thank you so much for your time. Now, if you want to reach out to Belinda, all her social handles are in the show notes, also her website, and you can also check out her YouTube channel where she shares a lot of tips and ideas on how you can get either in property or renovate your own place. So thank you once again, Belinda.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Nice to meet you both. And I hope everybody enjoyed something or took something out of my little chat. It's just me being me.
Now that we've interviewed our guest, join Charlene and I as we recap today's episode.
What an interesting story, hey, Steve?
It's very different to the other interviews, isn't it? Like, very different story that we've had before.
From police officer to renovator.
Yeah. I don't know, for me, I really noticed the passion, and I think, like, I must be naive, but I didn't think you could be passionate about renovating and investment, but obviously, Belinda is really passionate. But isn't that interesting, her story around being only one of, I think she said 11 girls in her graduating class, and the difficulties around that.
The stereotypes that they faced and the challenges, right?
Yeah, I found that quite interesting.
Yeah. Did you notice the authenticity she had through the whole session tonight?
Yeah, very authentic. And I think, listening to her at the point, that took courage to expose corruption. Not only did she expose the corruption, she was a woman exposing corruption in a man's club.
Absolutely.
So I think that just shows her resilience. And yes, it was one of the leading points, and that and the siege were the two key points that, said enough is enough. I need to get out of this career. But 21 years being a police officer, that's a huge effort, So that's a huge effort, but I just admire her courage. But then that courage to step out and do what she does.
That's right. And I like the fact that she said that she loves, or that she was more afraid of not doing anything than what's facing her, like of doing something. Yeah, it's very different, isn't it?
Very different, very interesting, and that's so true. You see a lot of elderly people, well, not elderly people, but you see a lot of people that don't want to retire. Yeah. Because, what am I going to do? And they just, find jobs and volunteer and do things they love. And it's probably, from that same emotion or that same heart space is, what am I going to do? Like, I'd rather do something than do nothing. And I think that was quite a powerful little analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm absolutely floored and, like, I guess just really inspired by the fact that she said that, she's just really embracing the feelings. Like, she just didn't try to avoid them. She just sat with those hard feelings that she had. Yeah. And just allowed them to be, and then just worked through it. Yeah, that takes resilience, doesn't it? It
does take resilience, and I know there's a lot of lessons we can learn out of today's podcast. There's a lot of lessons we can take. Like, obviously, property investments and renovating is like not for us, but that's not what the point of this podcast is. It's the point of her story and how she transformed her life, and I hope that if someone is interested in that area, that they could just start following her and learning and perhaps transform their lives in that area the way Belinda has.
That's right. And I love the fact that you've asked us those really practical questions, Stephen, like getting her to give tips about what can people do in regards to their superannuation, or how can people get started in a renovation. Because, people want to hear about that if they're interested in these things.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share it with your friends and family. Also, make sure to visit our website at www.rewriteyourlifestory.com.au to learn more about our mission, products and services. And remember, you have the power to rewrite your own life story. So go out there, face your challenges head on, and create the life you've always wanted. We'll see you in the next episode.